is Alistair. You can find me on Twitter. I want to talk to you about something that's been bothering me for the last couple of years. I think when we talk about big data, we're missing the point, because big data is really three things. It's a trifecta of all the information we're going to collect, the machines that will chew on that information and find insights for us, and then the interfaces with which those machines will interrupt us and tell us what to do. Now, I'm going to take you way back to the dawn of time when I was a little tiny kid. And once upon a time, I used to fire up my Apple II computer and write code. I could just as easily sit down and type let A equal 10 as I could type in the command to run a game. It was up to me what I did. A few years later, we started to get the start of computers suggesting things to us, computers interrupting us. And today, my life is dictated by a tyranny of small red circles. How many people, when you wake up, the first thing you do in the morning is look at your smartphone? You should probably look at your partner. Just some personal advice. It's early, but I thought I would have that little piece of advice for you. So, our lives are kind of ruled by these machines, and I think this is indicative of where we're going as a society. The most important part of this is that this trifecta is kind of creeping up on us. And each of these individual things doesn't seem that interesting, but when you get all three together, they are transformative. First of all, let's look at data. What big data really means is, you just heard, data tends to consist of these three V's. The volume, which is the big part, the velocity, and the variety. And those three V's are nice, but what's really interesting about data is that the vanishing cost of getting all three is upon us. So big data is not so much about these three V's, but it's about the fact that for a long time, all you could do is pick 2 out of 3. So you could get something that was fast and varied, but you couldn't have a lot of it, or you could get a lot of data that was varied, but you couldn't query it very quickly. And today, the cost of getting all three is vanishingly small. It's so cheap we can't bill for it. If you look at something like Google, when you do a query across hundreds of terabytes of data, and you get back an answer in milliseconds. And when things become cheap, strange stuff happens. Historically, I like to think of big data as this idea that big times fast times varied equals a constant, and that constant is dropping precipitously. So think about the era of the Industrial Revolution in England. Newcomen had built this pump. The pump sucked water out of coal mines that fed the rest of the Industrial Revolution. And Newcomen's atmospheric engine was a wonder of engineering, but James Watt made it 4 times more efficient. So James Watt's engine was 4 times better at turning coal into energy, which should be a good thing. This thing uses 75% less coal, so we should have had much more energy to work on. And so there's a guy named William Stanley Jevons who was tasked with analyzing the amount of energy that the Industrial Revolution had. And by all his economic training, when we got a system that was 4 times as efficient processing energy, we should have had 4 times more energy to go around. And that's not what Jevons saw. Tasked with analyzing how much energy was in the ground in England during the Industrial Revolution, Jevons saw that the more efficient the systems got, the more we consumed. This is known as Jevons' paradox. Jevons said, shouldn't more efficiency mean less consumption? It turns out that's not what happens, because when we have greater efficiency, that lowers our costs. When we lower our costs, we find new uses. When we find new uses, we generate more demand, which means more consumption. And Jevons' paradox is upon us for data. Big data ultimately is about abundance. It's about what happens when something becomes abundant and free, and the economic and social consequences of that. Because what happens when big data goes mainstream is transformative. I mean, take a look 10 years in the future for how you will run your life. As a consumer, we are going to have access to a life log that changes how we live, how we love, how we work, and how we play. And that life log is going to be made up of all kinds of information about ourselves. It's going to be made up of our footsteps. It's going to be made up of our budgets. It's going to be made up of our calendars. It's going to be made up of health data. It's going to be made up of everything from the scale that weighs you in the morning to the thing that looks at how far you're walking to the temperature in your house to dumb shit like forks that measure how much you eat. It's going to be all of these things, but it's going to be more, because the whole, in this case, is far greater than the sum of the parts. The machines can infer fascinating things, and most of this data already exists. The problem is you probably just don't have access to it. I mean, there's travel data. Have you gone and looked at what Google knows about your travel? Because it's fascinating. There's stuff like speeding tickets. There's taxes you've paid. There's vaccination history, unless you live in certain parts of California. That's a joke for the Americans in the room. There's educational history that tracks things like what your report card was like and how well you did in school. There's cell tower information that shows you where you traveled each day and how many calls you made and how much time you spent in those locations. There's credit card history. There's purchasing history. There's bank machine history. There's airplane travel. There's so much information out there. And this is a slippery slope to this weird human-machine hybrid where the data that we're collecting about ourselves becomes essential to us. Part of the problem is you don't own this data today. And I think there's a fundamental moral issue here. But make no mistake, your life log already exists. It would be great if you got access to it. And when you do, it will transform how you administer your entire existence. Most of this data is not available. Fitbit, for example, won't let you download direct data. They're working on changing this. But more and more of this stuff winds up in walled gardens of mobile phones and large consumer companies that are hoarding this data and putting up gardens to encourage you to stay within their confines. All of this data is fascinating, but it's not data you're actually going to look at. The challenge here is that over 99% of the data we manufacture, we never look at a second time. Facebook pictures, tweets, Flickr uploads, we never go and look at it a second time. So what do you do with that? Well, as Christopher Nguyen once said, he's one of the guys that designed Gmail, the only reason for big data to exist is to give machines something to do. Because the smart agents that chew on that stuff show us that humans cannot process our past. David Allen said, your mind is for having ideas, not holding them. And so most of what we store, we don't even bother to keep track of. We manufacture our memories. There was a very interesting study done that asked people how many of them saw the video of the first plane hitting the Twin Towers after 9/11. A huge percentage of people said they saw it. The footage was never broadcast until the next day. We manufacture our memories. We are always inconsistent about this stuff, but help is on the way. 1.35 billion humans, 1 out of every 4 humans, knows how to use Facebook. The average Facebook user's on there for over an hour a day. 4 billion of us have smart or function phones. We are creating systems with which to manage our lives. We are turning this device into a prosthetic brain for ourselves. And today, those devices look pretty simple. I mean, you have Google Now that'll tell you when to leave for a meeting. You have Siri that'll give you questionable advice about whether it heard you properly or not. You have Cortana, named after Halo. So there's a lot of different technologies coming around, but these things are on a path. As surely as Clippy was the start, this is the middle. As a result of these tools, we've already abdicated skills like wayfinding and contact management. How many people here remember more than 10 phone numbers off by heart? That would have once been unthinkable. We have a prosthetic brain whispering in our ears, giving us advice. The map I see when I look at something on Google Maps is not your map because it's enhanced by data pulled from my email and my calendar about where I am and where I'm going. The internet is being tailored to us based on the feeds with which that we share with it. I get pop-ups on my desktop culled from my email telling me when it's time to make a flight. There are applications like Charlie. This one actually makes you more fun at parties. It tells you things about people in the room that you're about to meet so that you can seem really interesting. We are creating this new sort of generation of Homo connectus that's us tied to a prosthetic brain. And there are lots of people that work on this stuff. This is Steve Mann. He's a crazy genius out of the Northeast, originally a Canadian, go Canada, who I think is on the 41st or 42nd version of his goggles, and these things give him augmented information. Originally it was a backpack, now it's a little thing on his eyes. And this thing tells him all kinds of data about who's around him and makes him smarter by his own admission. Another person at MIT working on this, Thad Sturmer, built a set of goggles by his own admission, a very awkward person, and he said that these goggles made him really interesting. When he met people, they gave him nuggets of information about who he was meeting and what he should do. Starner said this made him fascinating, and suddenly he was the most interesting person in the room. Google recently filed a patent, and this patent allows you to ask questions of what Google Glass or whatever goggles you're wearing have seen. So you can say things like, what were the paintings I saw when I was in Paris? Did I take my pills today? Show me all the faces of the people I saw between 1 and 3 p.m., or in the case of Web Summit, 1 to 3 a.m. This is crazy technology. This is perfect recall based on video stuff. Facebook yesterday just announced this idea of machine learning that can tell you things about what's in a picture if you're blind. This is not far away. But when those machines have something interesting to tell us, they need to be able to interrupt. So the third leg of that stool of big data and smart agents is interruption. Stuart Brand once said, the right information in the right place just changes your life. Ori Inbar, who runs the Augmented World Expo, talks about augmented reality as something that emerges and augments the real world. It shouldn't distract you from the real world, it should add to it. And today, by many people's admission, augmented reality has a pop-up book syndrome. It's all cute little toys where you put your hand out and some kind of shape on your hand makes something appear. But it's going to get better. If you look at where Magic Leap is going, the user interfaces that we are projecting into the retina are dramatically different from those we're familiar with today. So I like a broader definition of augmented reality. I say augmented reality's job is to interrupt my senses. And I can do it for many senses. I can interrupt your sight. We're familiar with heads-up displays. Soon we'll be familiar with things projecting into our eyes. I can do it with touch. I have a wide skin surface, so I can have an Apple Watch tapping here. I can have different places in my body receiving information. I can do it with sound. I can have a little voice in my ear telling me someone's name. I can make a high-pitched noise when someone's lying, for example. Very hard to overload sound. You can probably only parse 1 or 2 pieces of data without it becoming cacophony. Smell and taste, less likely to be sources of interruption. But basically, augmented reality is about interrupting your senses. Because your human brain is incredibly plastic. This is something called the North Paw belt. People put it around their waist. The belt essentially vibrates on one of 8 pads around your waist, which is north. So as you walk, it changes the vibration. People put this on. Within about a day, they stop noticing the vibration, and they stop getting lost. You can take someone wearing one of these into a strange city, they'll go walk for an hour and find their way home. And when they take it off, they report symptoms of incredible disorientation that border on vertigo. This is your human brain ingesting another sense in about 2 days. Our brain is incredibly plastic. As we learn to interrupt it, we will start to understand what's going on. Virtual reality and data won't be about reading a chart from 3 sides. It'll be about immersing yourself in data and thinking there's something bad over there. In the same way that in a dark room, you know there's someone in the corner breathing in a creepy way. Yeah, creepy. All right, so what we've seen is the evolution of digital design from electronic bits as print to interactivity to personalization to interruption. Interruption is basically the machine is telling you interesting stuff. So this is where it gets cool because the consequences are amazing. First of all, there's good stuff. As a human, your brain is the best thing about you. When you are born, your brain is as small as possible and grows as fast as possible so you don't kill your mother. The human has evolved where the brain grows incredibly quickly, so you literally don't split your mother in half being born. Your brain consumes a vast amount of the calories and energy in your body, and yet it represents a very small amount of that mass. And humans have always mitigated the weakness of our flesh. We've used tack and blockle and tack to lift things. Block and tackle, that's better, to lift things. Any horse can outpull a human, but any human with enough block and tackle can outpull a horse. We've invented things to swim underwater. We've invented things to search the sum of human knowledge. We've invented things to amplify and suppress ideas in a timeline. This is a pretty sophisticated thing that maybe 10 years ago only Bloomberg traders knew, and today we're all comfortable with it. We've invented an RSS feed for humans, and we've ultimately figured out how to manage scarce resources. So the good thing about this quantified world of data, interruption, and smart agents is that we will find better ways to use our resources. We will learn what makes us happy. If I'm sitting around and my heart rate goes up and my pupils dilate and I get the fear-flight response, I'll know what words or what people I was meeting with and find out those people caused me stress. This could be amazing for curing things like PTSD. But there's a lot of downside, too. There's a suggestion that this will make us less creative, that by showing us the path that is probable, we will spend less time thinking about the path that is possible. Machines are for optimization. Humans are for inspiration. And as we rely on the optimization of machines, we abandon the leap of faith that humans tend to make. How many people here are impressed when someone remembers their birthday? Yeah, thanks for ruining that, Facebook. And so we're going to see a widening of the digital divide. Those that have access to this kind of technology have tremendous advantage over those that don't. We're going to see arms races of agents. This is a guy named Casey. And while my time here is short, I want to read you his Tinder profile. My perfect date night. I pick you up in my Ford Focus. You get in, there's candles in the car, and you go, "Isn't that dangerous?" And I go, "Yes, but I like danger." We go to your favorite restaurant and have a fantastic meal. We come outside and see my car's on fire. And you go, "Casey, your car's on fire. Aren't you upset?" I pull out a bag of marshmallows and go, no, I knew this was going to happen, and I kiss you in front of my burning car. I want to go on a date with Casey. He sounds awesome. What you may not know is that this particular bio has been A/B tested and optimized very heavily, down to the point of saying yours car's on fire, which makes him seem less of a snob. And Casey's also a computer programmer who has a piece of software called Eigenfaces. And he trained Eigenfaces to recognize the kind of women he'd like to date on Tinder. And after a few swipes, it can automatically swipe. If there's a picture in the frame, it decides whether he'd like it. But he's not done yet, because Casey also has chatbot running that does natural language parsing and puts his prospective partner through a gauntlet of questions. And if she is lucky enough to navigate the questions he's put out for her, she gets to talk to a real Casey. Creepy as fuck. In this data-driven world, it's really hard to hide. This is me drinking a can of hot coffee out of a vending machine in Japan. By the way, why the hell isn't hot coffee nationally mandated everywhere? It should come out of vending machines. What you may not notice is there's two people in this picture. There's a guy in the background here. And because this picture was taken with high enough resolution, Facebook's asking me to tag him. And even if I don't, it knows that he was in that picture at that time. Every smartphone is a CCTV. If you go and watch Enemy of the State and you replace the word satellite with drone, it is a documentary. And I'm actually not kidding. We don't need Snow Crash and other ideas of hacking the human brain when we can hack our data and algorithms. If you're reliant on something at a party to tell you whether you know someone, and I say, you don't know them, and not only that, when you've met them, they've kicked you in the personal parts, you're going to run away, and that'll change the nature of that meeting. Once I have access to your algorithms and your data, you are incredibly vulnerable. This is going to be a huge industry. We're not there yet. Someone at HP said, we don't have an Internet of Things, we have a lot of things on the internet. But it's coming very soon. And it's going to be worth a lot of money, possibly $1 trillion. This trifecta of data, agents, and interruption may well be the next big industry. If I had to place my own bets, this is what the next decade of computing looks like. We will spend our lives analyzing everything. You just heard from Rana El-Kaloubi talking about Affectiva. Affectiva can analyze your emotions based on facial microexpressions. This is Ben Weber from Sociometric. They can predict the stress in your body 15 minutes before cortisol levels in your saliva go up based on the tone of voice in meetings from this little box around his neck. That's not what's creepy. What's creepy is those two things are just software upgrades to your phone. We are moving to this new species, call it Homo connectus, that is a human-machine hybrid. And there are a few things we should do about it. First of all, we should probably make some legal changes. Your smartphone should probably be able to plead the fifth. It knows more about you than any attorney, and yet it's not subject to attorney-client privilege. That's probably an important legal decision for us to make. We need to change the right of discovery. If you are accused of a crime, many constitutions going back to the Magna Carta will tell you, I'm sorry, but the right of discovery says you're allowed to see the evidence against you. I think we need to change that, because if you get the evidence against you and it's recorded through headcams and CCTV and a bunch of hard drives show up, that's not very good for beginning your defense. We have to change the right of discovery to say, I need to see the evidence against me using the tools of my accuser. If they've got facial recognition, I should see facial recognition. If they can look at license plates, I should see license plates. Simply giving us information without the tools to access them widens the gulf and will cause horrible injustice. We have to ask ourselves questions like, is lack of alibi sufficient for suspicion? If you are one of 30 people who did not have their phone on or did not have a known location based on your phone when a murder was committed, is that reason enough to haul you in for questioning? Because the odds are better than that with which a jury would convict someone. So I may sound like a Luddite. Some of these things are a little scary. Casey's a creepy bastard, but I'm sure someone's going to invent the countermeasures, and then we'll just have machines swiping one another and occasionally calling their humans. So I don't want to seem like a Luddite, but I really do think that ultimately in this world of big data, smart agents, and interruption, nobody should know more about you than yourself. It's okay for others to collect data on us, but nobody should know more about us than we do about ourselves, because this trifecta is going to accelerate. There's actually 4 things. There's the data, which feeds the agents. There's the agents, which interrupt us. And there's the interruption, which the machines learn about and see if it worked or not. You all heard about Tesla's self-driving car. The genius of Elon Musk was not that he built a Tesla. It's that he managed to get past 10 years of government regulation by offering self-driving cars as a DLC to cars already on the road. In the first week, those cars were a little scary. Humans had to put their hands back on the wheel. They had to correct their course. By the second week, people reported those cars getting dramatically better, no longer veering off, no longer missing exits, no longer pulling to the right or left, because they were learning from the people. We don't understand the power of feedback at scale. This cycle of big data feeding agents, agents interrupting us, and the interruptions becoming the source of additional data on whether that was effective, done across all humans, is going to accelerate this transition faster than any of us think possible. And because of that, I believe we're missing the picture. I think that we are actually giving our species a massive cognitive upgrade for which our laws and our ethics are completely unprepared. The trifecta of big data, smart agents, and augmented reality is, I believe, at the root of the next decade of human-computer interaction. So I'll be happy to take some questions. Hopefully that was a nice quick rant. If you want to yell at me, you can obviously do so here, or you can mail me here. Thank you very much.
All right, does anybody have any questions for Alistair? Oh, thank you for being right here. Speak right into the mic.
Hi, Alistair.
Hi.
Thank you so much for this information. It was wonderful. Well, I want to talk about the dark side because it's a big imaginary that everybody, it's not to say the negative, but artificial intelligence and this big data, I would like to have a bit of your future ball, like your idea about it, and what do you imagine?
So I think the thing people don't realize is that initially there's machine learning, which is just machines telling you some stuff, very specialized, and we understand that, and we're already familiar with things like expert systems, Bayesian algorithms. I mean, yesterday on stage, Google announced the Gmail writing your mails for you. What we're going to see next is more purpose-built automation, purpose-built AI. So something that's very good at summarizing a book, something that's very good at predicting the best way you should drive. And we're already seeing that in our lives, right? In the old days, 2 years ago, when you were driving, once upon a time, when you were driving, you'd be stuck on the highway. Today, Google Maps will suggest other routes. What they're effectively doing is there's a machine learning algorithm that's increasing the carrying capacity of today's highways by suggesting alternate routes. That's amazing. We just upgraded the capacity of our highways thanks to a machine, right? So step one was the little stuff, the smart agents. Step two is this idea of machine learning that's going after specific problems. And that's really where the middle-class jobs are the most at risk, because blue-collar work that's very manual, things like caregiving, very hard for a machine to do. And then high-end or creative work that's well-paid and tends to involve nonlinear thinking and not optimization but inspiration, fairly well protected. But the middle class, that stuff's in a lot of trouble. Those jobs, people that think they have jobs, I think something like 1 in 5 jobs are going to be replaced by automation. And we always see that when old jobs go away, new jobs come in. But in this case, they're qualitatively different, because in this case, you have something that's thinking. In the past, you had a muscle upgrade. Now you have a brain upgrade. So I think that the big idea of AI, the Ray Kurzweilian sort of singularity, I don't pretend to know the answer to that. But I think that what's going to happen is by the time that the singularity arrives, we won't notice as much, because we'll be the machines and the machines will be us. So like, we're becoming this new thing that's part machine anyway, and I believe that what'll happen is you're going to have this weird sort of human-machine amalgam that will be the AI. We kind of won't notice, because it'll just feel like we got smarter, I'm guessing. By then I'll probably be senile, so I'll be happy for the upgrade, but yes. Any other questions?
Got one more right here.
Hi there.
Hi.
Okay, a bit loud. So about the Homo connectus and us connecting to machines, because all of the information we'll get about everyone won't be based on our memories, but on the different devices telling us what to remember. Also, a lot of our choices are going to be made by devices for us. Do you think we'll start losing our identity of self and become more of a community instead of just being myself and the rest around me?
So the reason I love the kind of work I do on this is that I get to play where the rubber of humanity hits the road of technology, and these are the interesting questions. I think it'll be very hard to reinvent ourselves, for example. We can't like change our identities very easily because we have this digital history. There's very good evidence that if you recall a memory, that memory is subject for editing. In fact, in research with people who have post-traumatic stress syndrome, they will get the person to write down the thing that makes them stressful, and then they'll have them read what they've written while giving them drugs that to get rid of short-term memory. And it's traumatic for them to read it the first time, but after 4 or 5 readings over 4 or 5 sessions, it gets easier, because what's actually happening is when we bring our memories out, they're subject to editing. And so almost all the things you remember are lies, because the more you remember them, the more you edit them. That's probably an important part of being human. There's a good reason we don't remember pain very well, or we go around saying ow all the time. And so we're going to take more and more of our memories, especially the informational ones, objective stuff, and we're going to retain the subjective thoughts. But the cognitive dissonance between the subjective memories in our head and the objective memories in a machine are going to be very difficult. Like, you think you're really responsible, but actually your machine tells you press the snooze button 5 times. I have a hard time reconciling that. And I don't know what'll happen there. Like, that's a weird sort of cognitive dissonance. So I think that our sense of self, which is often subjective, is going to be forced to conflict, or to encounter not only ourselves, but comparing ourselves to others. So I think it'll, in some cases, make us think collectively. One of the things I love about Rana's technology from Affectiva is it's the first time we've been able to quantify emotion. And I think that if you don't consider the emotional component in this, if you don't consider the humanistic side of this, and you look at it in a very mechanistic sort of Silicon Valley way, you risk alienating billions of humans, because that's not how most humans experience the world.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for questions. Alistair, I'm pretty sure they know where to find you on Twitter.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.